Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Interceptor Researches. Today I'm going to be kicking off a series called Religion in Final Fantasy. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, religion in Final Fantasy, is that like how they use God's names, like Shiva, or of course Sin in Final Fantasy X, and other illusions like that. But what I want to do in this series is actually more than illusion work to Earth religions. Now, there will be some mention of them because they help you interpret the religious background of a world or a religious sense of the world, but this series is not going to be an illusion fest. This series is actually going to be focusing on what are the religious systems in world. So to answer that, in this episode I'm just going to be doing the introduction of what that means and how this series will proceed. So first of all, what is religion? There's a lot of debate. I am of the school that it is from the Latin religio. So re, we'll get to in a moment, but lego meaning to bind. So to bind something back is religion. So religion is some sort of bind or pact between a race, generally a mortal race, but it could be an immortal race, just not an all-powerful immortal race, with some sort of divine power or powers, where the mortal race depends on the divinity for some sort of power or knowledge or to avert disaster, something like that. So the bind can be a positive or a negative dependence. And if you think about religions in our world, you see that as well, where you have something like the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. They did things to appease their gods and make sure that things turned out right. Christianity, although it still follows into that, technically speaking, is a positive dependence. With our binding to God, we receive benefits, whereas the Roman and Greek is more avoiding punishment. So it can always be a thin line because, of course, in Christianity, you don't want to end up in hell. But generally, there are more positives than negative. And you perceive your relationship with the divinity in a more positive way than in a more negative or mandatory way. Now, religion is also more than just philosophy. Philosophy, coming from the Greek philosophos, is love of wisdom. And what it has come to mean in the modern world is essentially an approach to life. So a series of thoughts or a system of thought that guides how you live in the world. And that is a part of religion. A part of religion is that system of thought that guides how you act. But philosophy is solely that. Religion is also more than simply admitting that divine items like crystals or creatures exist, right? We'll see in some of the games that there are divinities, there are higher powers, but there's no sense of that relationship or that obligation. So that's not quite religion, right? Religion is a series of rituals and beliefs that build the relationship between the individual or the community and the divine. As a part of religion, there are prophecies and other supernatural occurrences. Prophecies and powers, let's call them supernatural powers, can be from God or from a divinity, but they can also be from other powers. So that's going to be a question that we'll see in the Final Fantasy series. Oh, there's this prophecy. Who gave the prophecy? Where did the prophet's power come from? Is there any sense of that? Generally, no. Most of the time, they don't really discuss the origin of the prophecies and whether or not it has a divine origin or it's something supernatural but not divine. And so those are the questions, those are the definitions that I want to keep in mind as I go through this series of religion in Final Fantasy. Actually trying to figure out in every world, what is the relationship between the culture and divinity? Is there a system of rituals? Is it positive or negative? Or is it simply a series of allusions to various Earth religions that are not a coherent system, which is where most of them fall, honestly. So the guiding question for this series is that over the series, from Final Fantasy 1 to Final Fantasy 15, religions do seem to become more prominent, more fleshed out, in the way that the games themselves become more fleshed out and more complicated. The plots are more full. However, religions are still underdeveloped in comparison to political systems, magical systems, and the like. And I want to try and figure out why that is. That's just a guiding question, a hypothesis. I have not looked completely through all of the games. I have not written the script for all of them yet. So by the time I get to Final Fantasy 15, I may have a completely different insight to things. But I think it'll be really interesting to see why, or at least try to figure out why religion is a dominant part, but it's not, with the possible exception of Final Fantasy X, not the most fleshed out element of the game. You know, what does that say about Japanese culture and its attitudes towards religion, or the general world attitude towards religion? Which I think is really fascinating. I love to think about different religions and how they interact with cultures, because religions are, of course, a part of culture, but they also go beyond culture, especially things like, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism to an extent. The bigger religions go beyond one cultural bound. And so they're part of the culture and not part of the culture at the same time. So it will be interesting to see the in-game parallels, and then also how on a meta level religion plays out across these games. So next week we will start with Final Fantasy 1, perhaps the simplest of the Final Fantasy games, but nevertheless capturing some of those D&D religious elements. And so we will explore what we can there, and thank you so much for watching. Please comment below if you have any thoughts about these questions, or any terms that you need clarified that I didn't address. Like prophecy. What really is prophecy? Because it's not quite what people think that it is, technically speaking. So comment below with any questions that you would like to see addressed in this series, any terminology questions, or just other Interceptor Researches ideas. Because I'll probably try to do one Final Fantasy game a week and then some other videos. So feel free to hit me up with new Interceptor Researches questions below, or check out the Twitter. At Interceptor is my hashtag IR. And we'll see how it goes. I'm really excited. Okay, take care. Interceptor out.